A subject we talk about for a long time, but I would like the people listening right now to very kindly and very politely stop people in their tracks when they tell you that a mate of a mate of a mate has heard something, because this gets into the mental health issue, Dr. Chris, and it's the state of the worst case scenario, and it's the state of the myth. And it's causing much more upheaval than the horrible reality of this. And it is non-stop, and it's not being seen as much because it's all in our WhatsApp groups. It's all these little groups, and we're all sending these, and someone will always put a message in it. Everyone that works in this show, everyone that was in Fight and Talk today, we're talking about offer, and everyone had a message on a WhatsApp group. There was complete nonsense.
Yeah, well, that's why programs like this are important, and why, if you're not careful, you can end up with people learning the mistake, not the reality. Because, you know, these myth-busting type things are very valuable in the sense of they are educative, but they can end up with people remembering the wrong thing. So I prefer much more when I'm talking to people, I don't dwell on the myths. I always just deluge people with the facts and the information, because then people tend to remember those rather than obsessing about what someone got wrong. But you're right, and the internet has totally changed the way that we approach any kind of crisis, really, because information, the speed of transmission of information has just gone out of all proportion, hasn't it? If you think about the banking crisis in 2007-8, we think that social media probably had a lot to do with runs on banks and the precipitation of a lot of that, because where previously news would have been filtered at the rate of a daily newspaper, and that would have been the day's news that the media would have digested, talked about and reported. Now you've got news moving at the pace of however fast an email or a tweet or a Facebook post can fly around the earth. And this is totally changing the dynamics of reporting and the way people react and respond to it. And it's not filtered in the same way as there's no editor, there's nobody taking a common sense view. Instead, it's just direct from one person to another, and there is the opportunity for big filter bubble effects to kick in, and people end up amplifying nonsense. And then other people believe it because they see lots of people reacting to it, so they think, well, it must be true then. Yeah.
That's the con. And the pro at the moment is that community you can get together through it, which is good, but the massive con is the fake news. It's just being spread about in a lot of things. A text and a call together for you. Dr. Chris Barry has messaged in to say, should I quit smoking now, or will it make no difference in the short term? And David in Leeds wants to add that actually you want to mention vapes, and then we'll get an answer for both. David?
Oh, yes. Well, it was just that, but I'm talking about my home city of Leeds. And when I go to the railway station, which I frequently do, well, I've stopped now because I'm working from home, but you get clouds of steam or water vapour from people using e-cigarettes at the station entrance, and as soon as they come off the train, they do it. And for 100 yards either side of the railway station, there's clouds of steam. And I don't know much about e-cigarettes, but a lot of them seem to have these tanks on, and they resemble steam engines as they're walking down the street.
It's like the old days.
I just wondered if there's any danger that the vapour that's coming out could conceivably add to the problem of the virus spreading.
It's a great question, David. Thank you for it. So Barry, should have quit smoking. David, if people are breathing into their lungs the vape and breathing it out, are they increasing the risk of people catching it?
Right, first of all, Barry, there's no time like the present to quit smoking, because from the minute you quit smoking, you win on so many levels. Not only do you start saving enormous amounts of money, but very, very quickly your disease risk from a whole raft of disorders plummets. And smoking is far worse for your heart and blood vessels than it is for your lungs, actually. And you immediately have a big reduction in your heart attack and stroke risk from the minute you stop smoking.
Could I add a wee caveat to that as someone who's given up on several occasions? The first time I gave up properly, when I was 30, I had a lot of long coughing up, the stuff that makes you never fully go back to smoking. I'm still guilty once in a while, but would the worry be there that if he's been smoking for 20 years, right, and he gives up now, he's going to have that, and that's the lungs being sore, and there'd be a paranoia with that, wouldn't there?
Possibly, but if you anticipate that that's what's going to happen, and the reason that you got that rebound coughing, Colin, is because when you smoke, the linings of your airways are covered in tiny hairs. They're called stereocilia, and they beat, and they carry mucus out of the lung, and anything that you've inhaled, muck, other kind of pollution, particles of viruses, bacteria, foreign dust and other stuff sticks to the mucus, and then the wafting of these hairs carries the muck-laden mucus out of the lungs, and you cough it up and swallow it. Smoking paralyses the action of those cilia, so the muck stays in your lungs for a lot longer and in higher volumes. So when you stop smoking, the cilia recover and start to beat more again, and this means that there is a phase during which your lungs do express more of this muck because it's cleaning themselves out. If you anticipate that's going to happen, then you won't be too alarmed by it. And remember that the coronavirus thing doesn't just cause a cough, it's a cough with this other constellation of symptoms. Almost everyone has, or at some point reports a high fever. So if you don't have a fever and you've just got a bit of what you call a smoker's cough, then that shouldn't alarm you.
Now,
to go back to go back to the vaping question, while the vape itself isn't a risk, as in what that you are seeing and smelling is the fine particles and the molecules that have come out, and they are going up your nose, and you can smell them because they're activating nerve pathways at the top of your nose. They're nonetheless a proxy for where the air that person has breathed out is going.
Wow.
And if there were virus particles in there, they could well have been carried by the same air currents that have drifted along and blown the smoke to you. They could well have blown virus to you. And it was interesting. I was following a car down the road the other day, and the person in the car in front was clearly vaping because I had blueberry smells coming into my car. And, you know, although a virus is bigger than the molecule of the vape flavour, at the same time, it's still a proxy marker for where the air is going. So if you look where the smoke goes, that's where the infection could be going.
It's always good to phone in where the expert's really clever and then the presenter's quite stupid, because then everyone will hopefully understand it, because if I can understand it, so can most people listening. So what you're saying is, do you know those environmental ads that show how much pollution comes out of a plane and stuff? Is that what you mean by the proxy thing? Do you mean like, well, it just goes to show where our air goes and how far it travels?
Yeah. Imagine I could freeze time for a second and you see a trail of smoke. Well, that smoke may be invisible to you, but you can smell it, so you know where the smoke is. That is air that was in a person's lungs.
Right.
And it must be because they've breathed it out and it's the smell from the vape. And the fact you can smell it means that was air they've just breathed out. If they've just breathed that out, they could have breathed virus particles out, which could have been blown along on the air currents with that smoke, and you could breathe them in.
Okay.
So it's a proxy marker for where the air goes. It reminds you that, you know, it's all very well standing 6 feet apart from somebody, but these viruses are very small, they can travel very fast, and you don't need many of them to get infected.